Good morning, everybody. Yes, we're here and we're live, and Pumi managed to get power, which is, what a thrill, because these days, if you even have power, that's fantastic. She's managed somehow to hotspot off her phone, which is what we had to do the other day. You see, a Boer or a Zulu makes a plan. Hey,
Always. Mm-hmm. Always. It's a South African. It's a South African truism.
Yeah, we make a plan. That's what we do. And my God, they're testing us, eh? Yes. Did you see? Oh my God, this is so funny. Did you see that clip of Lindiwe Zulu? She was on SABC News, and her power went out. And that's exactly what she does. She just goes. It goes dark, and you just see the reflection in her sunglasses, and she goes, "Oh no!" And that's the end of the interview. Let me see if I can play it for you. I don't know if it has audio. Sia's going to see if you can't find a clip on Twitter, but watch this, just to get the visuals. If you're listening to us on the podcast, please just hop onto YouTube and just take a look, or on Twitter or wherever you find it, because honestly, I don't know where else to find it. But she just basically goes, "Oh no," in the middle of the interview, and then it switches off, and you just see her glasses in the screen. It's hilarious. So it's like this, and then she's talking, and then 1, 2, boom, goes dead, and she goes, "Oh no." And they cross back.
Oh, that look on Vuyo Mvoko. Look on Vuyo Mvoko's face, though.
Like if there was ever a single situation that could describe the ANC, it's that. It's like they don't even know how they've got into this situation. They just know it's bad.
Gosh,
it's hilarious. Anyway, yeah. So we're all coping with load shedding. Yesterday, I went to the dentist, which was it's always a horrible and unpleasant. Yeah, I know. It's always an unpleasant experience. But she's such a sweet woman. But I hate going to the dentist. It's been a thing since I was a kid. It was scary. It was painful. It was horrible. It was a scary place. And she's the loveliest woman. This woman I go to, and she's so sweet. Like, children come to her from all over the place because she's so good with them. So I'm obviously a children because I have to go to her as well. Anyway, as I arrived, she was busy pouring, I kid you not, pouring petrol into a generator outside her practice so that she could operate the drill and the suction and all that stuff just in case she needed it. And
wow.
I just went for a cleaning, so it wasn't a big thing. But she said if she doesn't have the generator, even though they've got batteries there as well, the batteries are not strong enough to power the I think the suction or the drill, or one of the two. So I was like, oh my God, you got to be kidding. There's my dentist with a big plastic bottle filling up a generator right outside her own dental practice. I'm like, South Africans, really, we are the most resilient people in the world. It's not something which we should have to be, because this is such a backward problem for a country like ours to be dealing with, especially when we are generating, I think it's a quarter of the electricity we used to. Like, Eskom's demand has gone right down, right? The supply has gone right down. Their demand has gone right down. They're a monopoly and they still can't run. But it's an amazing situation. It's an amazing situation to find ourselves in. We used to supply power to every other country in Africa. Well, at least in Sub-Saharan.
We still do. Supply Zimbabwe, Botswana. And so I'm always asking myself, with our power problems, do they have the same thing? Like, are they having load shedding the way we're having load shedding because we supply them with power?
Pardon my ignorance. Can you break that down, please? How do we supply other countries?
So we
generate all of their power?
We used to supply in excess. We used to have so much power that basically it was cheaper than it ever should have been right from the start, because we produced so much, and we had lots of coal, and we had enough power stations, and then those weren't maintained and they weren't looked after, and then the ANC decided to build some more power stations, but they ran hopelessly over budget, and in the meantime the whole place was hollowed out. All the good engineers were fired and cable deployment started taking place. This is a well-established story, and it's really something that we're going to get into today. I'm really excited about the Burning Platform today, because the best person to talk to today is Ted Blom, who we know is an energy specialist, right? He's the guy who has told us about Eskom almost every step of the way. So you don't have to ask me. We can talk about this with him later. He's the real smart ass when it comes to this stuff. And I don't mean that in a disrespectful way. He's been watching this for years.
So these other countries, like Zimbabwe, for example, they don't have their own power plants. They don't generate their own electricity at all. They're fully supplied by us.
I don't know the answer, but I know that we supply them. I don't actually. Well, this is the kind of thing.
I don't know if they're fully supplied by us, but let's ask. You will stay on here. Let's ask Ted.
We will. We'll speak to him later because he came to Eskom.
Writing my notes.
I mean, Ted says that he's been watching Eskom closely. He says they've been consistently underreporting for almost a year. He tweeted earlier that this week that there was a shortfall of 5,136 megawatts, and that Eskom is actually implementing stage 6 load shedding to handle the shortfall, but they're lying to us. Stage 6 means they're cutting 6,000 megawatts from the power grid when it becomes unstable. Stage 2 doubles the frequency of stage 1. Stage 3 doubles the frequency of stage 2, and so on. So, I mean, this is the stuff. This is what we're stuck with. And for many people, it's gone beyond a joke, you know. I don't think that we're the worst off in the world, but we're certainly right up there. And this is what happens when you have an incompetent government. People always say, in fact, the president said just the other day, Cyril Ramaphosa himself, he said, people think that corruption is a victimless crime. Well, Mr. President, it certainly is not. And that anyone sitting in the dark this morning or last night, or at some point today, because it's going to happen again, I think it's scheduled for 8 o'clock in the morning for where I am. So we'll just finish the show and then it'll be off.
Are your schedules even accurate? Because I've been asking everyone now just to make sure my schedules aren't accurate anymore. Yesterday, I felt so dismayed and defeated, like a pie thrown on my face moment, because I was on it. I was like, yeah, usually my electricity cuts at 8 and it's back promptly at 10. And so I was making some dinner at about 6. I had my phone next to me because I was talking to a friend and had a glass of wine. So I just felt like, I was on top of the day. And then randomly, at like 18 minutes past 6, everything just cuts. My phone died. And I thought, I gobbled the last bit of wine and I thought, I'm going to nap now. I went to bed. I cuddled my pillow and I napped.
Well, you know, that's one of the things you can do when the power goes off. And I'm always grateful for a time to sleep, but it doesn't make sense to sleep at 6 in the evening, for example, because you're going to wake up when it comes back on and then you're going to go back to sleep again. I also mentioned yesterday, this is where a lot of fires start because people are leaving heaters on and they don't remember whether they've switched them on or off, and then the power goes off and then it comes on at some random time and then there's something on top of the heater and that catches fire. Not to mention the fact that at my parents' house, apparently even when load shedding ended yesterday, the power didn't come back on because it had blown up something in the transformer. So this is what happens when your power's up and down the whole time, the actual grid gets damaged. Not to mention, equipment at home. Like if your laptop is plugged in and power goes on and off the whole time, then it actually, well, not a laptop, a desktop, because that relies on power from, the power cable, that actually damages the equipment. So the millions and millions of rands that every household is in danger of losing because of this makes it even worse. Anyway, I mean, we all know what's going on, right? So there's no point in talking about it. The government are completely powerless to help us. They are absolutely incompetent, useless, and powerless. Yes, it's a pun, but it's for many people it's not funny. They're losing their sense of humor. I don't want us to ever lose our sense of humor on the show, but people are. I just want to go to a couple of points here on the comments this morning. First of all, welcome to Ryan, who's actually up early enough to watch this live today. Hey, Ryan, nice to have you with us. Lots of other people who've woken up. Hugo's here. Corona's Boring is one of our regulars. And then Anushka says, and this is very important, my YouTube popped up with a notification on my phone that the show is live. Is that because I liked and subscribed? Yes, it is. Loving it. So, Sia, will you do the like and subscribe, please, for this morning? Here he is, Sia Sangweni, everybody. And he's here to remind us of what we have to do. Go, take it away, Sia.
Hi guys, welcome back to the Cliff Central YouTube channel. To make sure that you don't miss out on any of the action, click like and subscribe to get notifications right on your device.
Perfect.
I still don't have a trademark yet. I feel like there
I know,
should be something.
you have to have a hand signal of some kind. You know, you have to be able to do something with people.
I'll end up doing the Macarena one of these days.
Yeah. Bees Rockstar Gaming says this load shedding is not cool. Ruth says we currently have load shedding, so we won't be staying. So I won't be staying too long. Monica says, I don't use heaters. I use 5 cats on top of layers of blankets, and they take and that's still safer. Yeah. Stage 10 is when Eskom takes away your partner because he or she is the light of your life.
What's that boom
By the
song?
way,
can we
talk? Yeah, you light up my life. You give me hope to carry on. That one. It's a good song. I love that. Super Jacob Zuma says, what a name. Super Jacob Zuma says, he says going from I did not benefit from digital vibes to I have consulted my family and we will pay everything back within 14 days is beautifully said.
Hey.
Yes.
I was just like, hey, but this guy, what the hell? We'll pay back the money.
And apparently
it's some kind of under the tree justice here.
Yeah, but he's also apparently gone off to KZN to be with his family and to hide away from the media. I mean, this is like when you catch a child with his hand in the cookie jar. But at the same time, I do want to say, at very least, and I know it's slim pickings when you come to honor in the ANC, at very least, even if it took a little while, he's admitted it and he's promised to pay back the money. This is something we never get from politicians. So if he sticks to his word, this is praiseworthy. And I mean, I know that in the land of the blind, the one-eyed is king. I would just
don't do it.
I would like
don't do it.
I would like it if this actually happens. And if it does happen, it would be a better example than all of those hide of the rhino people who go, "Huh, me? I didn't steal. Are you mad? I would never take money."
Do you still think there's a good ANC and a bad ANC? That's all I have
to say. No. Booms, you've disabused me of that notion. And doing the Burning Platform with you over a couple of months has convinced me there is no such thing. The ANC is so corrupted and rotten from within that there is no life left in the corpse. It's done for. And the only people who keep that hope alive, that dream of the ANC being alive, the only people who do that are the corpse. That's all.
But what are they even feasting on when their salaries aren't even paid on time?
Well, here's a
They're going to be picketing next week. They're going to be picketing next week, Tuesday.
Ooh, to be
There's a statement by Pulemabe.
I saw that. Now, what do you? Well, I mean, we don't want to waste all the politics before the Burning Platform, do we? Let's hold on to that until 7. Actually, there's more stuff to talk about. First of all, yesterday we had the story of the woman with the 10 babies and, the decaplets. Now, I am led to believe by a source who's this is a friend of mine who actually is in charge of a massive publishing business and who is one of the people who I think is always honest and honorable. He would never publish anything on his Facebook because he's a publisher that he wouldn't publish in print. Okay. And I mean books. And he put up this morning, do not believe this bullshit story about the 10 children. It is Iqbal Serve and the people at IOL desperately trying to create a stir and sell some copy and get some clicks. And you know what? I can believe that Iqbal Serve and those assholes at IOL, who really are the least credible. Talk about fake news. Apparently, Remember Dr. Robin yesterday? Dr. Robin, who's an obstetrician and a gynecologist who listens to the show. She's one of our diehard friends and fans, and we just love Robin to pieces, just like all of the people who listen to us. But Robin says there's no way this is true. No way. So if Dr. Robin says it, and this friend of mine whose social media I saw this morning when I woke up, if they both say it's bullshit, it's probably bullshit. Right. What have you heard? What's the latest you've heard?
Well, yesterday afternoon, the Department of Health took out a statement saying they've done walked the gamut and searched, and they have found no record of these babies being born. And then at 3 p.m., about an hour or so after the statement from the Department of Health, there was a statement from the family saying these babies have been born. It's a true story. It's real. And they will release pictures of the babies when they're good and ready, because according to custom, so Gareth, I don't know if white people do this, but really according to custom, babies are not seen by anybody outside of the family, at least for the first month. They kept safe away from all of your skwakwalalamu. Because you must keep them away from, because old people have stuff. You have stuff. You have bad vibes. Not digital vibes, not just digital. Bad vibes.
Yes.
So you keep them away. You keep the babies safe and hidden with the gogos and the mama.
Maybe that's true. I'm not sure. Maybe that's true. But the thing
for me,
I don't know if I can believe any of that, because also, there's these traditions and these cultural observations which are very conveniently pulled out of the woodwork when someone's trying to prove or disprove something, but otherwise they're hardly known to many of us. I mean, there's stuff that suddenly it becomes, because of course you can't argue with culture, right? So that's because it's sacred. It's something sacred you can't touch. You can't go, bullshit, that's not our culture. Because if you do, then all the traditionalists will say, but it is. What do you know? You sell out, urbanized, modern, you've turned your back on your people kind of black person. You know what I mean.
Gareth, culture aside, there should still be a medical record, though.
Of course. I mean, this has got nothing to do with culture. You're not allowed to hide a child if you can't not get a birth certificate for a child in South Africa. It's illegal. So forget your culture.
So
sorry.
Let's go with it for 2 seconds that the story is fake. What would the intention be?
The intention would be clicks and us talking about
the ultimate clickbait. The ultimate clickbait.
If anything,
that's gone international.
They've gone international, and let me tell you, the other thing is that these guys, they may be terrible people, they may be completely not credible, but they seem to know how to make us pay attention. They know how to get us talking. This story
was more than 24 hours.
This story's been trending for like 48, maybe even longer hours, and that's clever of them. I mean, if that's all they're after, remember these websites rely on traffic. Now, if they got a huge injection of traffic, don't you for a minute think that they aren't going to go and take this to lazy ad agencies all over the country and say, look at how our numbers have gone up in the month of, we are the most trusted and credible news service, blah, blah, blah. Then they get the advertising revenue. Trust me, that happens.
But the stakes are so high. If perhaps they were reporting on a woman is pregnant with 10 children in South Africa and they were building up over the pregnancy, and then towards delivery they say, unfortunately she lost the children, then that would be a different outcome.
No,
they've said the children are born, they said they're healthy, we're now waiting to see them.
So what do you mean by
fake story? They have a lot to lose.
What? Like, what do you have? What's the penalty for fake news these days? Don't people just forget? There's no credibility there anyway. Yeah, there's no credibility there anyway. And what is the penalty for fake news? Nothing. Nobody gets punished with fake news. We all move on. We go, oh, okay, that was fake. And next story comes up and we click on that. Because we're so,
but you know what?
we're so easily distracted. We're like children. We don't pay attention long enough to know whether something's true or not.
I don't know then. I do not know. It's just
I don't think there's a
bizarre
price.
to me if it would be fake.
There's no price for fake news. I mean, IOL have been consistently printing propaganda and bullshit for upwards of 5 years now. And everybody knows it. People talk about it in coffee shops and restaurants. They're like, oh, that IOL, what a ridiculous. But they're still in business.
You know what, for me, has been so amazing to watch over the lifespan of this story, which has been longer than the usual 15 minutes, right?
Yeah.
Is how politics have poisoned everything in this country.
Yeah.
So just watching the way that people are responding to it online, the people that are defending IOL and Iqbal and Piet Rampedi, the people that are, and it's just, it's mind-blowing for me that the divisive politics that are currently like running and ruining the country have seeped so deep into the fabric of our community that nothing is not about politics. I mean, just watching the Tuma Mina Minions, Tuma Mina Media Group, all of that. And I'm just like, this has nothing to do with politics. This is a crazy story. Let's just start with the craziness of everything but people are like taking sides. And I was just like, we've got a big egg to unscramble here.
Well, look at this. This is reported today, Sean. I can't tell whether Sean's being sarcastic or not, but this reported today, a South African couple who set the new world record by giving birth to 10 babies this week has received a 1 million rand donation from philanthropist Dr. Iqbal Sir. Now, I can't tell whether he's being facetious or not, but I mean that, again, so we'd see that, we'd go, oh, clearly bullshit, and we just move on. There's no price for printing nonsense. This is why I have to say again, because we're coming to the end of our season on ENCA, and the only really controversial thing that got us a BCCSA complaint was getting David Icke, the conspiracy theorist, on. And we had him on, and we talked to him about conspiracy theories, which, why not get the world's best conspiracy theorist on to talk about that? He's undeniably the most well-known conspiracy theorist in the world. So well done to Sia for getting him on the show. Anyway, we were taken to the Broadcasting Complaints Commission by a group called Media Monitoring or something like that. It's William Bird and his people for disinformation or misinformation, because they couldn't even decide which one it was. This thing went to appeal, where both sides, and I've got to give ENCA credit for this, they actually fought. I think we had, oh my God, we had some incredible counsel representing us, and they also had pretty good ones on their side. The amount of money wasted on having an argument about disinformation and misinformation when you're talking to a conspiracy theorist blew my mind. And clearly, whoever is giving money to Media Monitoring, the people who brought the complaint, William Bird and company, whoever's giving them money has deep pockets, because this is such a non-issue to go all the way on. I mean, we didn't go to court. It's just the BCCSA. So frankly, who cares? I mean, I'm not going to apologize anyway. Show comes to an end in about, 3 weeks. So they can get fucked as far as I'm concerned. And they wasted all this money. But you talk about media misinformation or disinformation. Let me tell you something. Iqbal Serve has got a factory printing bullshit. And no one's taking him to the Broadcasting Complaints Commission or the South African Editors Forum or National Editors Forum or whatever else it is. He's just carrying on. Business is good. Making money. It's unbelievable. It's really, really incredible. So a niece of the baby shower mama apparently called into ENCA and spoke to Sally on the news. And she tried to spin the story along cultural lines, which is what Pumi was talking about earlier. But we don't know who this niece is. It could also be bullshit, right? That's what Angus says this morning. Thanks, Angus. If that story is real, I'll eat my own head, says Winsterian Pikachu. Fake news in a Trump voice.
Wow.
Well, yeah,
Okay, so I have some further clarification from Dr. Robin here. So she writes, so firstly, no one will have 10 babies sans ovarian stimulation. Then they are extremely unlikely to get as far as 29 weeks, and they will be in a neonatal ICU for weeks after that. There are such serious complications involved in this delivery. The medical world would know about it, and the delivery would have been recorded for prosperity and science. So these guys just want some cash. That is Dr. Robin.
Okay, so there is the story from about 6 or 8 weeks ago in Morocco. Yes. Y'all remember that, the Malian woman, right? So they just upped it by 1 because that woman had 9 babies. And that was all. I mean, she had to be airlifted from Mali to Morocco so that the procedure could be done, all of that. You know what I'm saying? But
you know what?
But
that makes it sound even more suspicious because they saw the reaction that the Mali woman got and they thought, wow, if we have that story here in South Africa, people will be thrilled to read it. And clearly it was. It just seems so artificial, the whole thing.
My conclusion of the story, though, which has nothing to do with whether it's fake or not, is can we not call them the Tembisa 10? Because that sort of sounds a little too court casey. It sounds a little too apartheid something that is still being unresolved. I don't know, it just doesn't sit well with me. Like the Tembisa 10 still out there large.
You know, there's so many things. There's so many layers to the story. I also saw Zweli Mkhize tweeted Pumla Williams to say, no, we found the family. The babies are, the comrades on the ground are assisting that family.
The comrades?
Oh God, there's just so much happening in the story. There's so much happening in the story, guys.
What an eventful 2021.
Let's turn our attention to a few other headlines. And I just think from now on, as just a statement of responsibility, every time we mention a story, it comes from IOL. We're just going to caveat it by saying this is from IOL, so you know, all right? It's not to say that everybody else is always credible, but I think it's important to acknowledge the sources if we think it's dodgy. Eskom has warned of more blackouts. This is stage 3 power cuts set for today. Apparently, there's no end in sight to the nation's overall power crisis. Utility Eskom is warning supply will be constrained for the foreseeable future. You know how deep this shit is when they say for the foreseeable future. On Wednesday, they upped the rolling blackouts to stage 4, citing further breakdowns and a need to preserve emergency generation capacity. South Africans vented to Eyewitness News about their frustrations amid the prospect of colder, dark nights to come. If ever they're sorry, they could have come up with another plan, said a frustrated resident in Johannesburg. We understand that load shedding needs to happen. We have made peace with that, but I think we're being taken for a ride, another one said. The fact that we've made peace with load shedding just proves how low our standards are. Anyway, from Thursday at 10 p.m., we will go back to stage 2 until Sunday night at 10 p.m. That's according to Skonati Manchasha, who is the spokesperson for Eskom. What a horrible job that is. Can you imagine? There's no amount of money you could pay me to do that. People just hate you straight away.
But apparently the money is good enough. Because after years of reporting against Eskom and all the malfeasance happening over there, the man jumped ship to go and be their spokesperson.
That's right. It's like you see so many people who used to be in journalism going to work for government because the money's better. Anyway, Education Labour Relations Council has reinstated Malcolm Williams as principal of Parktown Boys High in Johannesburg. The Gauteng Department of Education said it was disappointed regarding the decision to reinstate Williams and added that it was studying the decision and seeking legal counsel on the matter. Of course, they dismissed him for his role in events that led to the unfortunate death of grade 8 learner Enoch Mpianzi, you remember, in 2019. in a school outing that wasn't sanctioned by the department. Anyway, they've done investigations and they've decided that this guy is not to blame, and therefore he can be reinstated as principal of that school. Now, if they've done the investigations and there's a process that has been followed and they've decided that he's not responsible as the principal and he can resume his duties, then unless you have information that the rest of us don't, of course you're allowed to be upset by this, just like we can be upset about, someone being reinstated in government when they've been cleared of charges. You're allowed to be cross, you're allowed to ask questions, but unless you have information the rest of us don't, you got to accept the decision ultimately. So I don't know how this is still controversial. Of course, people are angry because, a child died, but we'll have to figure out on our own how we can make this work, how we can make sense of this from here on in. Anyway, the IEC, the Independent Electoral Commission, they have decided that they have to get ready and get geared up for what it describes as the most complex elections in South Africa's history. Obviously, that is because of coronavirus. Coronavirus. That's right. We haven't said that for a while. The nation's electoral commission said through Simon Mamabolo, who's the CEO, he addressed the official launch of 2021's local government elections. On Wednesday, he said this year's drive will be held under the tagline of "Every Voice Together." Okay, we don't need your ad campaign, dude. The 2021 local government elections will see 4,468 wards contested across the country, which is 67 more than we went and voted for in 2016. Teams are planning for 500 more voting stations, meaning that there will be more than 23,000 places for South Africans to cast their votes. 200 political parties will contest the elections. 200, with 65,000 candidates contesting different wards. Good. Let's make sure these elections are free and fair and that we can elect people who really genuinely have interests in making the community better, right? That would be good. That would be terrific. Okay. Dozens of children have been seized by armed groups in Mozambique. There is not a week that goes by that we don't hear a story like this, either from Nigeria. Yesterday it was Burkina Faso. Today it's Mozambique. And we've got the Pan-African Parliament, which we spoke to JJ Cornish about on Tuesday, where people are hitting each other and throwing chairs at each other. This is the continent we live in. It's embarrassing. I am upset that we have to be talking about the Pan-African Parliament, which is not a news story and shouldn't be a news story, and those people shouldn't even be here in Midrand, when their own countries are on fire. These governments on this continent need to get their shit together. Ordinary people are being harassed, kidnapped, killed, chased into refugee camps, trying to flee their own countries because the governments of those countries have not got control of the country. Armed groups plaguing parts of northern Mozambique for the past 3.5 years have abducted dozens of children. I'm sorry, if there is a crime that is bound to make every decent human being upset, it's the abduction of children by armed groups from their parents. You must be kidding me. I mean, this is just unbelievable. Save the Children, which is a British charity, said that during 2020, the abduction of children has become a new and alarmingly regular tactic by armed groups involved in the conflict. The numbers involved are likely higher than estimates, based on data collected by US conflict tracker ACLED. It said at least 51 children, most of them girls. Please, can we take this seriously, everybody? This is much, much more serious than, the 10 kids who supposedly or not supposedly born in some hospital in Tembisa. 51 girls or 51 kids, most of them girls, been stolen. These Islamist attacks have displaced some 700,000 people since 2017. There are some real problems going on. This is one of them. And finally, I can't wait to get to the end of the news today. It's all very upsetting.
Right.
This one is too. In Portugal, drug dealers took their business online to meet the challenges of the coronavirus pandemic. That's according to an EU report on Wednesday. Drug dealers adapted quickly to restrictions imposed across Europe to beat the virus. We're witnessing a dynamic and adaptive drug market, resilient to COVID-19, said
resilient.
Yeah, resilient. That's the director of the European Monitoring Center for Drugs and Drug Addiction. The pandemic accelerated the Uberization of the market, said this person. Ads could be placed online, allowing people to order using encrypted messaging apps for home delivery.
I can't believe they like only reporting. So this is a thing here, right? With WhatsApp.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
WhatsApps. You know how on like Marketplace on Facebook or any of those things, like people are always advertising shit, and then you get into a WhatsApp group, and then 15 WhatsApps later, boom, it's a drug dealer trying to sell you drugs. Just soliciting. Yeah. We were doing a project with one of my interns last year, and this was the thing. I mean, she came to me. She was like, "Sis, Pumi, you won't believe what keeps popping up. I joined all these like Facebook groups for entrepreneurs and small businesses and whatever, and then like there'll be a random person DMing you about drugs."
Wow. It's slightly admirable from my part, I have to say.
Enterprising to say the least.
Great entrepreneurship.
Yeah, that is, we talk about seizing opportunities. So this is happening obviously in Portugal. In Portugal, drugs are legal. That's obviously a big part of the story from Portugal, is that you can talk about it there. If you talk about it anywhere else, it's essentially a criminal matter, which is why even in this country, although weed has been legalized, there are other drugs that are still not legal and probably won't be for a very long time. So talking about them, dealing in them, and any kind of evidence that will lead to you being involved in a story like that is something that people don't talk about publicly. But as Pumi says, it's happening. It's happening right under our eyes. And it's now, it's got to a point where, frankly, if the government can't keep the lights on, what are they worrying about drugs for? Let people have as many drugs as they want. Stop making stupid rules that you can't enforce. Because how are you going to enforce it? What are you're going to send Lindiwe Zulu into a WhatsApp group where they're selling drugs, and then she's going to go, boom, I got you. And then what?
And then she has load shedding, so she can't pursue that.
Yeah, exactly.
Becky with that list.
Can you imagine? Well, John Bad Dog Hellno says, well, power's out in Benoni. So
what a name.
The names people have. Power's out this morning. I'll have to listen on the app. Not enough data to watch. Well, don't worry. There's nothing wrong with that. It is a podcast first and foremost. We've only added the visual part to it recently. Justice Lesilo says, Pumi Skonati is working against the same thing he was fighting for. How ironic. His articles are still online. Not funny. Funny, not funny. That's from Justice. Nice one. Zach Lesupi says, there's always smoke where that Malcolm Williams is. Ask anyone with kids going to the International School of South Africa, where he was principal for a very short period in Mafeking. Oh, wow. Okay.
Oh.
Well, then.
Maybe that's worth it. Busting aspersions.
Scandal.
Corona's Boring says, at least the leader of Boko Haram went out with a bang. Apparently, they took him.
Let's go to Sean. I don't want to do that.
Listen, okay, let's go to Sean, and I'm going to go try and get hold of Cell C to see if I can sort out my thing. I'll join back just now, guys.
All right, Pumilele. We'll do this now. There's Pumi Mashiho. She'll be back with us in a moment or two. First, let us return to Cape Town, where Sean Sanders is resplendent in his offices at Revix, and he's going to tell us this morning about what the hell is going on in the crypto market. I see it's back up to 36,800. It's really bouncing around a lot in the 30,000s of dollars. Sean, what's going on? Who is manipulating this? Are we finding a new point of stability? Was that $60,000 that we hit a couple of weeks ago, was that just a fluke, or do you think it's going to go back? Help us, because people are terrified. And there are people who are getting very panicky. We don't want that to happen, but like any other investment, you want people to be sensible about this. But can you give us some advice as to how to understand what's happening?
Yeah, morning, Gareth. So
hey,
I don't think crypto is going to become stable anytime soon, right? I mean, this is a very emotional asset class. People tend to sort of, move with their feelings, right? They'll buy, they'll sell based on the way that they feel. And it's exactly what we spoke about last week, right? I mean, we saw, a few big ups and downs over this last week. Yesterday, Bitcoin was up about 13%. This prior week, it's still down about 4%. And you see when the market starts dropping, people get scared and they immediately sell. And I spoke about this on your podcast last week. When that happens, you see a whole bunch of retail investors, so everyday people like you and I, sell out to the market's going down. And then when it bounces back up, like what it's doing now, they jump back in. So you've got like the worst of both worlds. So that's definitely something you need to be aware of. Keeping your emotions in check is really important. But there's been a lot that's happened in the last week, some good and not so, and then some that's not so good. So the first bit of big news was the fact that Donald Trump 2 days ago came out and called Bitcoin a scam against the dollar. And I mean, that's a bit of a sensationalist headline, because he actually came out to say, I don't like it because there's another cryptocurrency competing against the dollar. And he doesn't like that. So that was news. I don't really know if that had any big impact on the crypto price, but that was some really interesting news that came out. Then you had that Colonial Pipeline hack that took place, or data breach that took place at the end of last week. And you had the FBI and federal authorities in the US able to actually track down these hackers. And I think the hacker group was called DarkSide. They were supposedly Russian hackers, but they were actually able to recover, if I'm not mistaken, about 75%, which is about $5 million of the ransom that was paid in Bitcoin. And this is something that I think a lot of people don't quite understand. They think Bitcoin is anonymous and it's online and it's just, once you've made a payment, it's gone forever. But no, you can actually track, because it uses a blockchain. You can actually track every single transaction that's ever occurred. So this could actually be, in a very strange sense, a way that law enforcement actually then maybe starts turning its viewpoint on crypto and becoming a lot more accepting of it. So yeah, I guess that's actually a positive development, in my opinion. There's a lot of debate in the crypto community about that. And then probably the biggest news by far of this last week is that El Salvador has become the first country in the world to officially classify Bitcoin as legal tender. Now, I cannot understate just how important this is. Why? Because that means shops actually have to accept Bitcoin along the local currency that they have and the US dollar. That is a huge development. I mean, Gareth, 2 years ago, I was on your show and I was saying that there will be a sovereign nation, some country that's plagued with hyperinflation or something like that, that's going to accept a cryptocurrency as one of their currencies. And now this has happened. So this is really, really big news. So there's been a lot of developments in the crypto space, and this has driven the market quite a bit higher now. I mean, the market's up about 15% since this time yesterday.
Well, Monica says exactly that. She says, what do you think about it? Now, El Salvador is not the biggest or most exciting place in the world, but it is a start. And if a country like that does something which I think would have been considered revolutionary just a couple of weeks ago, that is the beginning of something very exciting. There's so much conversation going on around this G7 meeting, which is about to take place, because what Joe Biden's trying to do there is he's trying to establish a base level tax. Because what happens is, if he pushes up corporate taxes in America, all they're going to do is send their businesses overseas and register in other locations where they pay less tax. So what he's actually trying to do is bully the rest of the world into putting the baseline tax at 15%, which of course will just chase American businesses out. And the cleverest countries are going to be countries like El Salvador that say, well, come to us. We won't charge you any corporate tax. They will benefit. All they have to do is sit back and wait for the money to roll in, which is precisely what's going to happen for those countries that, like El Salvador, are smart enough to hop on the cryptocurrency bandwagon now and to start giving it some cred. They will probably be able to reap the benefits of being early adopters in this space. And I think that that's probably one of the reasons we should be excited as well. All of this global control by governments is going to result in squeezing and squeezing and squeezing until something pops out.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, this is a big development, again, with a small nation. Start looking at Zimbabwe, look at Argentina, potentially look at South Africa, right? At some point in time when your currency is depreciated that much and you've had to adopt the dollar, like it's not that big of a deal to then go and accept a digital currency, right? At the end of the day, any country that's got more remittances coming in than going out, by that nature, sort of you want to enable your people to be able to accept money internationally, and that's where Bitcoin comes in. But I agree. I think the regulatory arbitrage, which is what you're talking about there with, taxes and, regulations in different jurisdictions being different, right. I think that's going to become a much bigger factor over the next few years. I mean, it's sure, Biden can go around and say, listen, we need to have a minimum global tax of 15%. But what do you do about, let's say, the UAE, right, where you've got no corporate taxes? Or you look at, some other Gulf nations, like how on earth are they going to just introduce taxes, right?
They don't have to comply with some big... otherwise, what is sovereignty? I mean, like, you may as well just make yourself a vassal state of the United States. And the stupid thing about this is that even within the United States, you can't apply a single tax because Florida doesn't necessarily want to do what Massachusetts wants to do. So it's
exactly. This is why you've seen this huge move to Houston, right? Or to Texas, right? From California.
This is an antiquated idea. This is like, oh, well, government is so powerful that we can just make everybody bend to our will. Unfortunately, money doesn't flow uphill. And people in politics have never understood this because they've never actually made money. Very few people in politics have ever had a business. They've never had to understand this stuff. Let me tell you one other thing, that if anybody doubts that the Rand is going to end up being a lot less valuable over time than Bitcoin, if not already, then let me just sketch the scenario of Eskom for you, because the same people in charge of the Rand, essentially, and the ups and downs of what happens in our own market through regulation and influence and the control of infrastructure and everything else, those are the same people in charge of Eskom. So if you really think that the Rand is going to benefit from their stewardship, I have bad news for you. In the long run, it is better to have some decentralized situation where people all over the world know exactly what they're dealing with, and there is a blockchain, and there is accountability, and it can be traced, and it can't be lied about. That, to me, sounds like a much better system.
Yeah, look, I think this is the biggest opportunity for South Africans in particular. You've got the Rand, I don't know what it is today, but it's super strong against the dollar. It's super strong against, a lot of other international currencies because we're entering this commodity super cycle. Like, this is the time, in my opinion, again, just solely my opinion, not financial advice, to get your money out of South Africa or to get your money out of Rands. Move it into some harder currency. But what is a currency move at the end of the day? If you're holding, money essentially, and you've got a whole bunch more money being printed. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, you've had $500 billion printed this year alone. So, I mean, the inflation on money itself is insane. So looking at decentralized currencies like Bitcoin, I mean, I think it's a huge opportunity. And again, the market's down a good 40% odd from its all-time high. Is this a time to get in? Yeah, of course. I think it's a no-brainer at this point.
Well, it's 13 Rand 73 to the dollar. So that's a pretty good number to start doing some trades on. Anyway, thank you very much, Sean. And lots of comments and compliments for you, except from Andre, who's obviously terribly jealous. He says you look washed out, but Monica says you're looking perfect at always. Get some glasses, Andre. So again, not a week goes by that we don't talk about the ups and downs of crypto, because there's always exciting stuff happening. But again, there's no week that is too superficial or not superficial enough for us to also refer to the way Sean looks. Thanks, everybody. Very good. All right, Sean, good to see you, bro.
Thanks, Gareth. Yeah, have a good one. Bye.
Sean Sanders, go to revix.com and sign up today. It's free, and you can make it really easy for yourself. They just have to get your details in terms of making sure that it's all featured and it's all regular, because this is not something, as we discussed last week with Sean, that you can escape from a tax point of view. Everything that you do, government wants a piece of, because they've got to pay for all their fuck-ups, right? So there it is. There's a little look at what's going on in the world of cryptocurrency. In case you do want to know, the Bitcoin price at the moment, $36,755 as of 6:55 this morning, and Ethereum at $2,549. There we go. There's your update. That's what you need to know this morning. We've got lots of exciting things to talk about in the Burning Platform. That's coming up next. We've got Ted Blom, who's going to be joining us. Ted is probably one of the strongest and most credible voices when it comes to discussing the vagaries of Eskom. So this morning, we're really not shying away from the big stories, whether it's cryptocurrencies, whether it's international taxes, or whether it's Eskom, which really most South Africans, if you just take a look at social media yesterday, are upset about. Justifiably so, right?
Do you have the panic every so often throughout your day where you want to make sure, what battery percentage is my laptop on? What about my phone? Then I go around and make sure that everything is plugged in and charged sufficiently. It's silly.
Well, you know what's so funny is that despite having put in the inverter last week, and we tested it out, not because we wanted to, but we tested it out last Friday, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was looking at it yesterday thinking, are you going to make it through load shedding? Because load shedding went on for so long yesterday that I thought, oh my God, I can't afford to have any more power interruptions, because otherwise there isn't even going to be enough power in these batteries. So that's how people are thinking now. It's got beyond ridiculous. And if you're angry, you're allowed to be angry. But I will remind you, it probably doesn't do you any good.
But I saw a great meme, which is very apt in these times, that says something along the lines of, the secret to a successful relationship is to be in love with someone who's in a different load shedding area than you are. I thought, yep.
Oh, that is
call
so
on
true.
someone and say, hey, honey, are you home? I miss you so much.
Just checking, have you got power? Because I don't have power. No, very good. All right, and don't forget that we've got lots of other good stuff coming up, including the Birding Platform, which is not just a chance for us to check in on Eskom, but for us to talk a little bit about some of the big stories going on in politics, in the economy, and in international news. So it's a one-stop shop for you to keep up to date, where we don't pull any punches and we don't hold back on our points of view. That's with Pumi and this morning Ted Blom. And we'll get into all the other stories too. So stick around for that and a whole lot more. CliffCentral.com. It's just before 7.
Coming up on Auto Central.
Well, I think there's two things to consider, right? There's things that you can do during ownership of the vehicle, and there's things that you can do just before you sell. But the thing that's going to really, really kind of save you the most money is just maintenance. Keep that maintenance up. And just make sure that you're up to date with your services, because that's, going to impact how the car drives in the future for the next owner.
Catch Auto Central, SA's #1 motoring podcast, every Monday at 9 a.m.
Do you suffer from collectivism, collectivity, collectionitis? Do you have an obsession with objects? Are you a fanatic, a devotee, an aficionado? Cliff Central dispenses a weekly dose of collectomania. Join me as I talk to compulsive collectors. Fascinating, intriguing, possibly a little weird. Collectomania, Mondays on the Gareth Cliff Show. Brought to you by SA Gold Coin Exchange and the Scoin Shop. Righty, it is Thursday morning, cliffcentral.com. We've almost got to the end of another week, and it has been a cold and a bleak and a dark week, but we will make it through, because that's what we do. We, as we discussed with Pumi earlier this morning, we push through. South Africans always make a plan, and that's exactly what makes us so resilient, despite the fact that we have been through crappy government after crappy government since our inception as a country. It's unbelievable. Anyway, we've got to talk about quite a few things this morning. It is time for the Burning Platform, which is brought to you by Nando's. Every week we get to check in on the most important stories of the day and of the week, and today is no exception. We mentioned earlier that Zweli Mkhize has decided to go and hide out in KZN. He's so embarrassed by what's happened. The ANC has said that embattled Health Minister Zweli Mkhize made the right decision by going on special leave. And the president announced that he was placing Mkhize on special leave. Pressure had been mounting for him to act, for the minister to step aside in the digital vibes matter. Mkhize himself apologized during a media briefing in Kimberley over multi-million rand communications tender awarded from his department to close associates. I think there is a feeling, and I don't want to be too optimistic about the ANC because it's always a dangerous thing to do. I think there's a feeling among the people of South Africa that this corruption stuff is just beyond the pale now, and we are not going to take it anymore. I certainly get the impression that they're taking it more seriously than ever because of the Zweli Mkhize case. And rather than us just go, oh, what a disaster, oh, it's such a mess, oh, I can't believe this, which is obviously our inclination. And you would be right to do that, considering how many times we've been lied to and had, thieves with their hands in the till of South Africa. I understand there's huge suspicion around anyone in government, but maybe it's the first sign that there is a different approach being taken to these things. Before, this would have been brushed under the carpet, certainly in the Zuma era. He's not getting away with this. This is a very important minister. This is the guy who was heralded for taking us through Corona. This is the guy who was held aloft as a shining example of how important government can be and how effective they can be when battling things as threatening as an international pandemic. Remember, a year ago, Zweli Mkhize was probably one of the most important voices in South Africa. Now, embarrassingly, he is on special leave. He's gone back to hide out with his family in KZN. He says he's going to pay the money back. And the ANC is left with egg on their face. So let's take it for what it is and appreciate that it might be a move in the right direction. That's all I'm saying.
But don't you think it's a little too late for apologies or statements of this kind? Because for me as a citizen, I don't care about an apology like this. I don't care when it was heralded as a massive thing that our sitting president admitted to corruption and he announced that corruption is a big issue. I want to know how and why are we getting into these positions as a country as leadership.
And we want to see people going to jail now because the one thing
how did it even happen in the first place, Gareth? There are certain processes and procedures for people to be awarded tenders and for people to get certain deals in this country. How is it that someone who's as powerful as Dr. Zweli Mkhize is allowed to have his son so closely linked to business? How did we get to that point?
Unfortunately, you see, government is made up of people who are career politicians, and they are party members first, and then they are citizens much, much later down the line. Most of them are only used to receiving money from the public purse because they wouldn't earn money in the private sector. They are locusts. They basically swarm into a treasury. They deplete it of everything that they can, and then they fly out again. So this is how they operate. Therefore, if they can get money out for a member of their family, then they do that as well. It's not surprising. I know how it happens. You know how it happens. We mustn't be naive about this. The difference is that in South Africa, there seems to be very little cost for people to do that, even when they're caught red-handed. So in this case of Zweli Mkhize, because we're going to push this now to the nth degree, we're not just going to send him on special leave and then forget about it. Someone has to pay. And if it's paying back the money, that's all good and well, but this is a crime that's been committed. Someone needs to go to jail. Someone needs to be punished. It's not just a bad business deal where you can pay each other back. If Sia and I have an arrangement where he says he'll loan me 10 grand and I go off and I buy the things I need for 10 grand, and I say, I'll pay you back. I don't pay Sia back. I have a claim against, he has a claim against me for 10,000 rand. This is not like that. When you steal from the public purse, it's a criminal matter. It's not just a civil claim. Someone has to go to jail. And this is where the public prosecutor, the NPA, Shamila Batoy, who we've spoken about till we blew in the face, this woman has to pull her finger out of her ass and actually do something now. I don't know how it's possible for her to hold on to a job for as long as she has, where nothing seemingly is happening. It's just beyond a joke. Corona's Boring says, I live next to Dr. Zweli Mkhize's nephew. He was one of the tenderpreneurs building RDP houses with 1 bag of cement per house. I'd like to know what kind of a house the nephew of Dr. Zweli Mkhize lives in, if you would mind telling us. I'd like to know how that house looks. Bet you it's not an RDP.
Certain it's not even close to an RDP house.
So if you can tell us about that, that would be terrific. Anyway, so that's the big story of the day with respect to Zweli Mkhize. There's also a story about the ANC, which we'll get to in a minute, about plans to push through legislation allowing for the expropriation without compensation, which we know has been on the table for a very long time. EFF have told Parliament that they will not vote for the legislation in its current form. So we'll get into that just now. But I don't want to waste a second without this guy because he really is the man of the moment, and he's the perfect person to talk to this morning. He is Ted Blom. Ted is well known to our audience because he is a mining and energy advisor. He's also a problem solver and an advanced compliance analyst. He claims that Eskom has been lying to us. Ted, you don't look very impressed with things this morning, much like the rest of South Africa. How are you?
Hi, good morning. No, I'm actually very good. I've recovered from cancer, I believe. So I'm fighting fit and I'm ready for the game.
What I was referring to, of course, was Eskom, but congrats, and we're pleased that you are healthy and fighting fit. I'm delighted to hear it. We need people like you in our lives, and when it comes to energy, you're the guy that we want to hear from. So, Ted, yesterday we had a sudden surprise announcement that stage 4 had kicked in at about 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. This didn't surprise you, though. You've been watching what Eskom has been doing very carefully, and you have a way of telling whether they're telling the truth or not. They've been lying to us, haven't they?
Absolutely. I have evidence, which I'm prepared to show to a court of law, that Eskom has been underreporting. Last Wednesday, they were short of over 5,000 megawatts. In other words, level 6 type of stuff. And I've got it on record. Thank God, I saved it. And they have acknowledged subsequently, if you go to the broadband interview that Sikonati did, they've acknowledged having during the course of last Wednesday being over 4,000 megawatts short. But there have been new revelations overnight. And you can now call me Ted Blom Unplugged, because now I can talk about what I know and that I've been carrying in my heart secretly for the last 3 years. And that is that there's been a deliberate effort and strategy and capture of Eskom to drive it into the ground. De Ruyter acknowledged last night on Judge Dennis Davis' show that he thinks that Eskom's coal plants are not fixable and that Eskom must roll out renewables as soon as possible. Now, I was tipped off about this so-called secret strategy by some very senior ex-executives of Eskom. And I've been carrying this, and in fact, the unions are aware of this as well, because this was done in a union executive meeting where I was consulting. So this is now public knowledge, is that the official strategy of the government is not to fix the coal power stations. In fact, the writer says he's not going to waste more millions on fixing the coal power stations, but that effort must be directed to the renewable and environmental friendly future of Eskom.
So, Ted, it sounds like a bit of a conspiracy theory, because the minute you start talking about this wanton destruction of the electricity supply, that becomes a very different conversation to just incompetence. And we've dealt with incompetence over the years. We've also dealt with a hollowing out of Eskom. There's very little in terms of actual engineering know-how there. Maintenance has gone for a ball of shit. But what you're saying is they're actually actively trying to destroy what we already have, which is, I mean, that's a very different kettle of fish, and forcing us into the renewable path will renewable energy be able to supply even close to what the coal-fired power stations used to at their prime?
Okay, so it's very simple. I don't know where you're sitting this morning, but as far as I can see, the sun's not yet up. And I don't know if it's going to be strong today. Yesterday, it didn't come up to at all. The fact of the matter is this economy needs at least 32,000 megawatts of power. And renewables are not dispatchable. What does that mean? They're not predictable. You can't switch order renewables and say, I want power at 8 o'clock because I'm going to bake bread, or I'm going to run my smelter, or I want a new shift to go underground. To do that, if you're going to go the renewable route, you need lots and lots and lots of storage, because the weather could be like this for 5 days, and you either choose to switch off your economy or you invest heavily in storage. Worldwide, there is no utility scale storage available. That's what Eskom is trying to do with their new battery strategy, is an experiment. We are the guinea pigs worldwide for this stuff. And anyway, Eskom doesn't have the know-how, the technical know-how to build batteries. I mean, I've never come across an Eskom battery anywhere in my 60-odd years of life. So the bottom line is that it's a very irresponsible situation to abandon the coal assets, because it's either coal or nuclear. Those are the only two dispatchable. Yes, people say hydro, but we're a water scarce country, so you can't rely. Sweden and Finland and the Scandinavian countries can rely on hydro because they've got mountains and mountains of ice.
Ted, even in the most advanced and developed economies, the idea that these sustainable resources will be able to power up the entire economy, it has not been true. It will not be true for some time. And as you rightly point out, the biggest problem there is storage. No one has developed batteries that can adequately store and release on demand the required amount of output of energy. So we, as you rightly say, are stuck with two options, either nuclear or coal. In this country, we have abundant coal. We used to have very good quality coal until the Guptas started getting shit quality coal into all of our power stations. But the other problem is that this is pie in the sky. Now, who would be behind such a stupid idea? Who would be the one who makes a decision? Okay, guys, let's do what you're saying is true here. I'm going to take your word for it, Ted. Let's actually sabotage our own system in order to experiment with renewables, or to force the South African public to be the guinea pigs in this experiment. Who would be behind that? And who would be financing that? Or who would be promising some kind of deliverable at the end of the day? Because it seems to me that does sound a little bit like, the Illuminati are coming out of the woodwork to try and force us into this situation. Who would be making these decisions?
Okay, so if I may just correct you, Eskom has been, since 2001, been buying spot coal as part of their BE strategy. And so the quality of coal, because Eskom wasn't geared to survey the coal that they're buying in by the truckload. And there's more than 1,500 trucks a day going to Majuba Power Station, as an example. And delivering. So these samples, these loads are just dumped all over. They're not sampled. Nobody does quality control, etc. That's been going on since 2001, and really got to speed in 2006 when I went back to Eskom and I saw what was going on. So it's not new. It's not just the Guptas. The Guptas maybe perfected it, and in fact, it was further perfected by the Director last week when he signed the new Duva coal contract, and he doubled the price of the coal from 198 Rand to 550 Rand on what is a corrupt deal, because the investors in Sereti Mining is Bata Trust and Tebe Investments, both investment arms of the ANC. So now you've got the ANC supplying expensive coal to Eskom. And lots of it, 8 million tons a year minimum. So that's been going on right under our noses, signed off by Director with a big smile. Now, you asked who's behind the other strategy. Well, I was told, and I believe it fully, that it's the cabal that is ruling the ANC, or one of the sectors of the ANC, or factors or factions or whatever, who are heavily invested in renewables as we speak, via their brothers-in-law and family. And they are totally geared up. And if you listen to some of the so-called analysts who are pro-renewable, they reckon that these guys are so geared up that they can salvage the loss of coal within 24 months. So this is a game plan that's been rolling out behind our backs.
Ted, many of us have been under the impression, I'm going to bring Pumi Mashiko into this as well. Pumi's with us on the burning platform this morning. I know we've only got you for about 20 more minutes, but Ted, it did feel like we were heading in the right direction when Andre de Ruyter was appointed, because it seemed like he was forcing municipalities who hadn't paid to pay. It seemed like he was starting to bring some smart people in there who could make sure that things were working again. He was taking a very hard look at maintenance of the power stations. Clearly, what you're telling me this morning is that this guy is part of the problem. He's got no solutions.
Well, that's why I call myself unplugged. I can now speak out because he's gone on record last night. So he's now admitted that he hasn't done the refurbishment and overall type of maintenance that they were boasting they were going to do 18 months ago. And in fact, he's just continued with the cut and paste type of maintenance. And that's why the same units, there's only 12 power stations in Mpumalanga. And the same, despite his categorical assurances prior to last night that he's done overalls. I mean, Gareth, just apply your mind. I don't know if you've ever been inside a power station. We're talking about hundreds of tons of machinery, and that takes a long time to build, 8 years or whatever. And if you're going to overhaul them, you need to take out all the wearing parts and get them remanufactured. If you do a car overhaul, you take out you only use the engine block. That's basically what stays behind. Right. Okay. Now, if you're going to do the same thing for a power station, you're going to use the engine block, and the rest you're going to refurbish or replace. If you do that at Eskom, they've got 80 odd generating units, 84, 83 odd generating units. For anybody to tell you that they're going to take 84 engines, even if it's car engines, apart in 18 months, reorder all the parts that need to be replaced, and put the thing together again in 100% working condition in 18 months, you've got to understand that that person must be smoking something, or he hasn't got a clue of what he's talking about. On top of that, I did the calculation that it will take at least 5 years and 600 billion rand, because these things have to be imported from overseas. If you want new turbines or blades or whatever it is, these things were manufactured. South Africa no longer has the capacity to do any of the manufacturing of these things.
Right.
You have to order them from overseas. These are big units. You need to ship them here. You can't fly them here. You need to get into a queue, an engineering queue overseas with your order. You need to pay up front. And if you've just paid 80 odd billion, which I think it's another lie by Eskom that they've all paid off 80 billion rands with the debt. But if you have paid off 80 billion of your cash flow to debt, where are you going to get the money to pay for the refurbishment of the stuff? And then the rate that came clean last night is that he hasn't done the refurbishment that he promised us, and which we were holding our breath for and our hopes on that. He hasn't done that, and he's now abandoning the coal fleet. So this puts us between a rock and a hard place, because what they're saying now is get used to the load shedding or get off the grid. And Eskom's been telling you secretly to get off the grid every time they say use electricity, with the screen messages and the public pronouncements. So okay. we had a very strong turning point here now.
I want to give Pumi a turn here. We were talking earlier about how much power Eskom supplies to the rest of Africa and all that, and we're not sure what the details of that are. I know that you would be able to help us. But Pums, do you want to put your question to Ted before we get into that? We can't hear you, Pumi. You need to go off mute. There we go.
Oh, sorry, guys. Here we are, a year later, I'm still muting my mic. But Ted, I think about a year and a half ago, Busi Mavuso from PLSA, when she was initially appointed as one of the board members at Eskom, when she came out and said, we have to be honest with the public. We have to tell the public that for the next 5 or 6 years, we're going to be under pressure because this is how long it's going to take to fix the problem. Everybody went up in arms. They vilified her. They hated her for making that statement. Is that what we need to be hearing from Eskom? The truth about how long it will take, how much, and what we need to do to deal with it. I mean, we can deal with it as long as we know if we told the truth. Is that the truth? And was Busi right or wrong to tell us that?
Okay, so having her vilified, I know the feeling. I've been vilified for 12 years for talking the facts as I understand them. And yes, I've just said so. To do a proper refurbishment job at Eskom and to pick up on the rear maintenance, or if you do the refurbishment, you don't have the maintenance load will decline. Is a 5-year job minimum, 600 billion rand minimum. And let's just get some facts on the table. The SIU and Bowman's both have indicated that the corruption at Eskom that they're aware of, and they haven't got to the Medupi and Kusile core supplier corruption, which started off on day one with 4 billion rand in the red. But they've picked up corruption of 178 plus billion rand. Eskom's debt is 400 billion rand. I've said for last 5 years, sort out the corruption, get the money back, and you can at least halve the debt. And everybody says, well, 200 billion Eskom can more or less afford to service and pay down the debt. At 480 billion, it's nearly an impossible job. So I don't know what the problem is. If everybody understands that half of the debt has been funding corruption, and a lot of it is the big players. I'm talking about the Hitachis, the Alstoms, the guys who were given the core contracts to build Medupi and Kusile, and who were swapped around by Brian Damas as part of the corrupt dealings that he was part of, which also hasn't come out. Then if we can recover that, or either write it off, we say, listen here, guys, you stole, or you, the banks, you funded this corruption. Take the knock, take it on the chin. We're not going to pay this corrupt money. We need some decisive action. But if we're all in collusion and hiding and lying, we aren't going to go anywhere.
No one's gone to jail, hey? As far as I can tell.
You're right.
No one. If we put Brian Damas in jail, or if we put any of the Eskom CEOs that have clearly got their hands in the till over the last couple of years, if we put any of them in jail, you better believe that would send a shockwave through the system. But of course, they're not going to jail because the politicians are protecting them. And
the politicians are eating out of the trough.
Yeah.
So, I mean, one of the things that you raise, Ted, and we never talk about this, is all this corruption and all this money, all this illicit money making the rounds. There are banks in the center of it. And even the banks aren't being held accountable. You know, nobody's saying, okay, but Gareth, have you ever tried to withdraw 10,000 rand from your bank account? Do you know how many people you have to talk to and the queue you have to stand in? And then, like, people can transfer 256 million from one account to another, and nobody can trace it back. Nobody can be like, hey, how does this happen? I think the collusion that happens is far bigger than just the government. It's not just the government. It's private sector. When you talk about Alstom, I mean, Alstom is a multinational company. It's,
yes,
you know, the little South African being, we're fucked.
That's why I think, and I mean, I've had noises from Zondo that they want me there, and then it seems to me they don't want me there. But the whole collusion started with the mandate and the date of commissioning of the Zondo Commission. You know, put yourself, just sit back and use some of the stuff that God gave you. If you're going to run a commission of inquiry, surely your starting point is, when last did this organization run well or properly? And it's got to be 2001, when Eskom won the Utility of the World Award or Global Award in New York City as the cheapest and most reliable and affordable energy in the world. They had a 95% energy availability. Last week, it was below 50%. Surely that's where you start. And not to tell Judge Zondo how to make tea and cake, but surely you start interviewing the CEOs from then on, the CFOs from then on, and you follow the trail and you try and see, where did this thing fall off the rails? You don't start in the middle because of the Guptas have been made a lot of noise of. Believe you me, the Guptas, as I said right up front, they maybe perfected some of the stealing, but they didn't originate the stealing. The stealing has been going on for far, far longer than that, and involves large companies. I've got evidence of BHP Billiton being involved in some of the fraud and corruption at Eskom.
So, Ted, because we don't want this to just be a place where we spill the tea, as Gen X said just now, because that's certainly what you're doing this morning, but we also want to look for a way out of this and a solution. And what is your advice to people? I mean, you said earlier we've got to either get off the grid or we've got to, I don't know, move to a country that actually doesn't have as much corruption when it comes to power utilities than we do. What are the options for ordinary South Africans, or what can we look forward to, or what can we prepare ourselves for, as Pumi pointed out earlier. We'd prefer to know what we're in for here.
Okay, so I believe that the mechanical side of the coal business is fixable. I understand that the cost of coal generation goes up over time because the mining costs go up over time. But to do that, as I said, it's going to have to take a bit of time and a lot of money. In the immediate crisis situation that you're now facing, and it, I think is going to be exacerbated over the next 12 months until rational thinking comes back to the table, is people need to sit down with their families and categorize what their needs are and say, this is critical stuff. I'm going to have to make a plan because come hell or high water, I cannot afford to not have these functions running in my house. And one of them might be your alarm system. Another might be your fridge system. Another will be your lights, especially if you've got kids, you've got to study for school, etc., etc. And say, okay, these are the core issues. How do I solve this? How do I solve this? Do it in small bites so that you can afford to do it over a couple of months or get a loan or do something. But to just sit and woe me every day, it's not good for the national psyche. It's not going to be good for your household psyche either. So you need to say, well, come hell or high water, I don't care what they do to me. But at least I know that I've got a system. I mean, I've just bought myself a gas little stove, camping stove. Why? Because I get irritated. My wife gets very irritated if she comes home from work and she can't have a cup of tea. That's her way of saying, well, I'm switching off from my office duties and I'm now going to be a mother and a wife. Then when it comes to supper time, you know, you can't eat out every night. You can't go to the pizzeria every night and buy pizzas. No. You'll get sick. So you might need to buy yourself a primer stove or something like that, or a gas stove. But you can't sit and wait for Eskom to do this for you. You need to take control of your own life and say, I'm going to be immune from Eskom.
And Ted, that doesn't mean you have to have an overall solution and get off the grid completely. That's very expensive. And for many of us, it's probably out of our reach to be able to spend that kind of money. Many people have done it, and I'm sure, are very grateful that they've done it. And also, they're paying less money over to corruption. Because otherwise you're complicit. If you're giving these people money, you're actually complicit in the corruption.
Funding the corruption, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think these are useful, practical solutions that each and every one of us can start taking up, buying a primus stove and a gas bottle and all that kind of thing. I mean, we've discussed gas as an option on this show many times, but there are also things that I don't know that we can totally make ourselves immune from this stuff. You know,
well, you can't, because your job probably requires, South Africa is the bastion of beneficiation of minerals. So you can't mine without industrial grade power. You can't smelt with industrial grade power. So yes, you won't be immune, and you can't get to work without robots working. So you can't make yourself immune, but at least make yourself a safe haven where you say, well, come here, I water the basic functions. I can look after my children. I can give them a hot plate of pap or soup or whatever it is at nighttime. And I don't have to go and shop every day like we used to do 50, 60 years ago because we didn't have fridges. At least I can keep my fridge of sorts going. And in terms of the cost of getting off the grid, if you do it in a modular fashion and you don't
I love that.
And you don't get ripped off,
that idea.
Most people can probably do a hell of a good job for under 100,000 Rand. And so if you're getting quotes that are higher than that, come to me. I'll point you to people that I'm prepared to put my name on who will get you off the grid in a sensible fashion and an affordable fashion.
Okay.
The modular approach really is something that you can do, right? Because you just do it every 2-3 months or whatever. Yeah. And within a year,
and you'll be saving money. If you get off the grid, you'll be saving money. It's like when you're sick. You don't go and eat all the pills in the chemist. You take what you need and you start off with that. And if that doesn't sort you out, you go and you take a little bit of antibiotics or you incrementally increase. You don't go to the chemist and swallow every pill that's in the chemist.
So Cyril has a really interesting question, and I wonder if you have any information about this, Ted. Can we deduct these purchases from our taxes? You know, like, you know, when my kid goes to a remedial school and you can deduct part of what the school fees is from our taxes. Can you do that with this?
Well, as things stand at the moment, unless if you're running a business from home, you won't be able to deduct it from taxes. I mean, in other countries like in America, you can deduct your mortgage payments from tax, which I think is the right thing, because then it encourages you to invest in bricks and mortar. Unfortunately, our tax system is a little bit archaic. So it's, unless you're running a business from home and you're then, of course, declaring your income from home, then you can, of course, deduct it from tax. But in fact, if Mr.
Which we now are. We're working from home.
Yeah, exactly. So, yes, I mean, I haven't spoken to tax people, although I've got very close relationships with them, and I'll ask them and maybe come back to you and give you the feedback. But I certainly think the problem is, if you're a pay-as-you-go taxpayer, then it's very difficult to deduct extra things from tax. But if you're an entrepreneur running your own business, of course you can deduct it. There's no doubt about it. Sorry.
Ted, one last thing, because I know you got to go shortly. We were talking about how we supply, or we used to supply, certainly, electricity to the rest of Africa. Certainly countries like Zimbabwe have relied very heavily on us. Are we still doing that? And is Eskom still responsible for powering much of sub-Saharan Africa, even though we have consistent shortages?
Yes, we still supply Botswana. We still supply Namibia, and certainly Zimbabwe, and even Zambia. But all these countries are making urgent plans to get off the South African grid, because they are also vulnerable to the irregular supply of power. And they get as short notice as you and I get that the load shedding is being implemented. You see, if you're running a pot line, if you don't have power for more than an hour and you're running a pot line, let's say you're making ingots of aluminium or platinum or metal or whatever you do, if that pot line freezes, what does it mean? It means you switch off the cathode and the anode, and it gets cold and it solidifies. It takes you 6 months or longer to chip that stuff out of that pot line. It's a disaster. So you're out of production for at least 6 months. And then the people that you're using to do the chipping, they're not technical experts. So they chip and they damage the insulation. And then you have to reline the pot line. Now, ask the smelting people what havoc it causes when you lose power and you haven't drained those pots. So you need at least an hour or two to drain the pots so that they're empty when the power goes off. Otherwise, they freeze, and then you've got a calamity. You'll be out of business. There's no doubt about it.
Wow. I mean, that's and we know that aluminium smelting, for example, is hugely energy intensive. I mean, if we switch off our aluminium smelters, suddenly there's a huge amount of electricity that's allowed back into the system. We have how many of those? We have one in Richards Bay, as far as I know,
and one at Mosel, even a bigger one. So there are two at Richards Bay, Hillside and Bayside. In fact, they were part of my portfolio when I was in the mining game at Gencor. And then after I left, they built Mosel because they thought it was such a good investment. And unfortunately, BHP, which still owns those, has realized that the power situation is not where it is. And they've actually cut back on some of those pot lines. They're not running at full production as far as I know.
Ted, it's always good to talk to you. Thank you very much for being on the Burning Platform this morning. We hope to see you again soon. And once more, congratulations on beating cancer. If you could do that, you might even be able to beat Eskom. We're on your side.
Thank you very much. I've been very blessed. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ted. Thank you. What a terrific guy. And the work he's doing is really just unbelievably. Talk about citizen activism. And remember, the part that Ted doesn't talk about is how much nonsense he has to put up with to bring this information to us, of course. And, how many people don't want him to speak openly like he is. And I think that it's extremely praiseworthy that there are good people in society who are fighting the good fight for us. So again, Ted Blom, always good to hear from you. So, Pumi, there are other things we need to talk about besides power. Are you ready to get into those?
Absolutely. Besides power, the power situation, you need power to do anything.
It's all or nothing, right? So apparently plans to push through expropriation without compensation have suffered a bit of a setback this week. Not surprisingly, the EFF have said they will not vote for the legislation in its current form. They support expropriation without compensation, but they believe the proposed laws don't go far enough. And this is where coalitions break down. Some people will say, actually, you shouldn't have expropriation without compensation. That is the the biggest problem in trying to make sure property rights are protected, which is the basis of the economy. And then there are other people who say, no, this doesn't go far enough. In this case, the EFF, who want more than just expropriation with compensation. I don't know what they want. Do they want it with violence? I mean, what are we asking for?
Gareth, the EFF, if we understand that the EFF's really only reason for being alive is the fact that they are there to pull the ANC further to the left. That's what they're there for. So everything that they ever push for is stuff that is taking the ANC further and further to the left. And when you think about the kind of noise that they make, that's what the noise is meant to do. So the derailment now of it's not going far enough. God, I think I've lost you and frozen.
No, you're still there.
Oh, okay, cool. This it is driving me berserk. I've been on the phone 20 minutes with Celsi, and it's driving me crazy. But that's what it is, So they push and push and push, and now it's on the agenda. Expropriation is on the agenda. We've got to look at Section 25. They pushed and pushed and pushed, and here we are. Now that it's on the agenda, now that it's being debated in Parliament, actually, no, it doesn't go far enough.
Yeah. Push further. But of course, all that will do that will just kick the can down the road. So in some ways, we should be grateful that the EFF is so stupid that they don't see that this is going to hamstring the process, because that's exactly what it's going to do.
Well, and I think more and more, this is my favorite drum to beat, more and more, all the people of South Africa should participate more. When there are public participations, when there are hearings, when you have to make submissions, we should be there. We should not be allowing ourselves for the 44 people that are the EFF representatives in Parliament to be the ones that can stall or move forward. 44 people, guys, that is who is holding all of us ransom. The ANC, and they are 300 odd people. But this is where it is. 44 people in Parliament can stall a legislation in this manner, and this is why we all have to participate. We have to be there.
I wanted your opinion before we wrap up the Burning Platform this morning on Twitter being banned from Nigeria by Muhammadu Buhari, the president of Nigeria, because of a tweet that he put out, which again is against these very arbitrary and capricious community guidelines and rules that Twitter say that they have. According to Donald Trump, not surprisingly, he says, "Well done to the country of Nigeria." Because they banned their president. He said he should have banned Facebook while he was still in office, but the company's boss kept calling me and coming to the White House for dinner, telling me how great I was. Mr. Trump, well, then you're an idiot, Donald. If it took that little to convince you not to go after bad people, then, he saw his customer. Maybe Mark Zuckerberg is cleverer than I've given him credit for. He can spot an idiot. This is a bad thing for Donald, not necessarily bad for Mark. If Mark could convince him that easily, just go for dinner and say how great I am. But I do think it's interesting. Do you think South Africa, this is a conversation that I had with Sia on Monday, I think it was. Think South Africa would be better off or worse off if we banned Twitter?
You see, the problem with bannings is it's a slippery road. It's very slippery. So you ban Twitter and people can't use that platform. Why don't we ban IOL? We don't like what they're saying and Iqbal Sube. When you start, it's a slippery road. And I think
we want to give government that kind of control, right?
We definitely don't want to give government that kind of control. They've already cocked up everything else they have on their plate, the thing about what's happening in Nigeria is Nigeria is also a series of dictators, coming on board, and the whole of Africa is regressing, actually, when you think about it. We're all just going backwards, not just South Africa, but the whole of Africa, where more and more power is going to the governments and more tin pots taking over and kind of trying.
Sad and depressing reality, but I think if we don't acknowledge it, then we're only fooling ourselves. And the idea that we might have reached our peak when Thabo Mbeki and Olusegun Obasanjo were trying to build up some kind of credibility in an African renaissance, and if that was the zenith of what we can achieve as a continent, I'm very concerned. Because as you rightly say, we have been slipping backwards. And I mentioned this morning, there are all these stories about, children being kidnapped and villages being torched, and 7,000 people in Burkina Faso yesterday who had to go and seek refuge in another part of the country because they were just essentially at the tip of a sword or at the barrel of a gun, forced out of their village. 7,000 people, to move 7,000 people, that's no messing around. These Islamist militant groups are doing their best to hold us all at ransom. And I just want to refer to one other story before we go, because I know that the Burning Platform is something you come to for, all the current affairs. What do you think of the proposed firearms legislation? Now, I don't know whether you're a gun owner or not. I don't know whether you care about this particularly, but we have Bheki Cele, who, again, is not a credible human being. He's a joke. He makes himself, with every occasion he's ever given to open his mouth, he makes himself more of a mockery of a sensible, serious person. He wants to remove the right of South Africans to defend themselves with a weapon, because he says that's the police's job. But we know already in a country like this, the police can't do that job. Furthermore, we know that women in this country are the victims of all kinds of violence and crime, and perhaps the only solution I've seen that's practical and sensible is the one that women might be able to arm themselves, so at least the attacker wouldn't know and he'd be less likely to strike. What do you feel about this? I mean, is it likely that this legislation will even be passed, or is it just pie in the sky? And does it show us again how government is trying to shut down all the avenues of escape and essentially make us hostages?
So the good news is that the ineptitude of the government means it will take a long time before they can pass, before they can get to the stage of even talking to everybody, consulting, it'll take a long time before we get there. But I think what we are seeing is we're seeing a center not holding at the ANC, like they're ricocheting from issue to issue, and everybody's doing it their own thing. And this is, I wanted to say, there was a center thing saying participating in politics, we're busy doing other things. It's just not realistic. But this is the problem with us not participating, even if it is for 10 minutes a day, looking at what's on the parliamentary website to see what bills are sitting in front of parliament, to show up because that's what they do. The consultations happen all over the country. When there are consultations, they're well publicized where they are, where you go, your civic center. Because if we don't take an interest in politics, who was it that said it? I mean, this is not news, right? Politics will always take an interest in you. Here we are today with the Eskom issue, because it was a political issue. It was a political issue and we didn't pay attention to it. Now we're stuck with having every 2 hours rolling blackouts throughout the country and our entire economy coming to a grinding halt. So it's not enough to just say, oh, well, I'm busy doing other things. You're not going to have those other things to be busy with if we don't take care of that stuff too.
Well, here's Rob Hutchinson, who we've had on the Burning Platform before. And I've actually been on his site to sign this petition. But with regards to the Firearms Control Act, people must sign the petitions. Make sure to also submit an official comment as Parliament discards signatures on a petition. We have an official participation platform on DRSA. So go along there. In fact, Rob, thank you for that. I'm glad you're listening to the show this morning, because I was going to mention that I went on your site the other day and I signed and I left a comment. And I hope that all of these comments will go to Parliament. And we do have to. Rob Hutchinson is an example of the kind of citizen action that you're talking about, Pumi. Ntokozo says,
they're non-profits, they're lobbyists, they're lobby groups, you can volunteer your time if you want to volunteer your time. Sure, there are many, many things. Just find the things that resonate with you and resonate with what you believe in, and find those groups. There are lobby groups for everything.
Ted used the word modular this morning. So be modular about your political influence. Okay, that's also a good point. I just want to go back to Ntokozo, because he said something interesting about Twitter. He says there's no need to ban Twitter. You could just ban yourself from Twitter and live a happier life. Precisely. You don't have to pay attention to that stuff. You really don't. So, all right.
Who still buys the stock?
No, exactly. Come on. I don't take anything that goes on Twitter seriously anymore. So, guys, thanks very much for this morning. Pumi, we're going to wrap it up on this note, and we will get going tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. bright and early. If you've got any suggestions of people that you'd like to have on the show, anything that you'd like us to discuss on the Burning Platform, please let us know by email, gareth@cliffcentral.com. It comes straight to me, and I always reply. So I'd love to hear from you. And Pums, we will see you next Thursday.
Next Thursday.
See you next Thursday. Wait, that's if you take that as an alliterative what do they call it, an acronym, we're in big trouble. See you next Thursday. All right, the Burning Platform is brought to you by Nando's, and we're always very, very excited when Nando's is part of anything, because we know it's cutting edge, it's the best, it's uncomplicated, it's fearless, it's unapologetic, and that's precisely what we try to do here every week. This is no exception. So thank you to Ted Blom, too, who made himself available this morning. He's very much in demand at the moment because he has such extraordinary things to tell us about Eskom. And I hope you have a good day. I hope you don't have too much load shedding. I hope no one messes with you. You've got enough to deal with. We all do. And we will see you tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. Have an awesome day, everybody.